It says you're recording. There we go. I think we are live, everybody. So welcome everyone to this. I don't know how many webinars we've done so far, Robert, but I think it feels like it's at least the second, maybe the third that we've been doing together. Yeah, it's the third one, talking about what the world looks like, particularly when it comes down to new concepts, new technology, and all of those things. And today we're going to kind of I wouldn't say put an end to the topic of skills-based hiring that we've talked about, but we've had a number of conversations already in 2024 about skills-based hiring, skills-based organizations. Now it's time to take it to the practicality of it and say, okay, how do you actually implement a skills-based hiring approach, having now been convinced it's a good idea? And we wanted to bring in people who've actually had experience of this so that they can share this with us. So firstly, let's make sure everyone can hear us okay. I don't know how many people are actually watching the show, but I hope that we're live and I hope there's people watching it. I do believe this is broadcast on LinkedIn in the main. So we're not going to be able to see you on Zoom. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn, just let us know that you can hear and see us okay. Just drop a line in the comments there. By the way, we've got a team looking at comments. So if you want to ask any questions or you have any dialogue you want to share with the wider crowd, do you make use of the LinkedIn comment thread, and one of the guys will pick that up and either bring it to our attention or they'll interact with you directly there. So wonderful to see you all. Let's do some intros real quick and go around Robin. Let's go counterclockwise as I see it. Dom, why don't you go first? Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, thanks, Hi, everyone that's tuned in. So my name is Dominic Joyce, current head of talent acquisition at Travelex, LinkedIn top voice in the job search and career space, and skills-based hire enthusiast. So thanks for having me on today.
You've outed yourself immediately as an enthusiast, Dom. I love it. Okay,
Well,
let's
Yes.
let's go to you, Andrea. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi everyone, Andrea Marston. I, until recently, was a global talent leader at VMware, stroke Broadcom, as Broadcom's now acquired VMware. Just left there, so currently taking a little bit of a break, and then we'll be looking for my new venture.
Fantastic.
And I'm a
stuff.
skills-based enthusiast, stroke cynicist.
Oh, so you're hedging your bets there, Andrea, which is going to make this conversation very spicy indeed. So great to see you on the panel, Andrea, and we've got Robert Nuri here as well, who you should know. But Robert, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, just quickly, Robert Nuri, CEO and co-founder of Arctic Shores, the task-based psychometric assessment company that helps organizations uncover potential and see more in people. We've been going for 10 years now, 3 million plus assessments in 45 different countries, and seen a lot over the last 10 years, straight from gamification as being the big trend when I started to now skills-based hiring. And like Andrea, I'm both an enthusiast and a skeptic of skills-based hiring as people currently understand it.
Yeah, fantastic. And there's going to be a sort of a goodie to announce, isn't there, in due course coming out of Arctic Shores. You want to just cover that one real quick before we dive into the context of the piece?
Yeah, so part of doing this is that we've been working for the last couple of months in coming up with a guide to help people from a practical point of view implement what is known as skills-based hiring, and actually contributions to that guide, which I'll be sharing a link to shortly, has come from the likes of Dom and Andrea, who I've had the pleasure of, and yourself, Hung, of talking to on my TA Disruptors podcast, and it's from input from the likes of Dom and Andrea and yourself and a few others that we've really put something together that will be much more practical and pragmatic about how you go about skills-based hiring than what we've currently seen today.
Fantastic. It might be a good time, actually, Robert, for us to have a look at that, particularly from the research that you've done, what the lay of the land is, and so on. So why don't we take a look at the small short data you've got and set the scene for us?
Sure. Let me just bring this up. Hung, if you can see it, give me a thumbs up. Brilliant. So just to sort of set the scene for this webinar, if it is other than AI, generative AI, the hot topic of the moment that everybody seems to be talking about is skills-based hiring. And I think there are two really interesting things around this. One is we all seem to be talking about something that we don't actually know what it means. And if there's one thing that everybody agrees on is that we don't know what actually, or we're clear about what a skill is. And there are so many different definitions that there's a sort of confusion around that. So it seems incredible that everybody's talking about something that we don't really have a clear definition for. And secondly, we've been trying to solve what is a complex problem, which is the rapid digitization of work, which has meant that we've needed new skills. And so we've come up with the skills-led organization. There's a lot of complexity around that. And then we've imposed it on talent acquisition to solve it. And I think those are the two big sort of challenges that I just want to share some thoughts around. And I'm sure Andrea and Dom will have further inputs as well. But if we just start with what's the promise of skills-based hiring on all of this? Why is everybody talking about it now? Well, the first thing around this is that we're moving from this world where experience seemed to be the most important thing. As many of you know, my big challenge to the world is how we can scrap the CV and how we can move beyond experience if we're really going to tackle social mobility. But one of the things that skills-based hiring is meant to do is to help us solve the skills shortage. There's a little bit of irony for me in all of this, is that we've got a skills crisis, and suddenly we're talking about skills-based hiring as the way to solve a skills crisis, rather than thinking about, actually, well, do we need to go to broader talent pools rather than targeting specific skills that we know are in short supply. So there is a little bit of challenge just in that alone. But we still got diversity remains a challenge around all of this. And so one of the other drivers behind skills-based hiring has been, well, how do we broaden out into broader talent pools? And one of the key things, if you look at why people have been excited about skills-based hiring, is that we need to move away from looking at degree titles, specific experience, even job titles. So the idea is, how do we broaden our talent pool in order to find ways to solve the skills crisis? We obviously still have challenges around the candidate experience. People continue to talk about things like ghosting and how do we get more people to come into the workforce, and therefore their experience in applying for jobs should be better, and skills-based hiring is meant to solve that. We then have the process at the moment that we need to make a lot better, and again, the use of AI into the hiring process for skills-based hiring is meant to solve that. And then we were talking a little bit earlier around this, both Dom and Andrea and I were sharing that TA teams have been shrunk in the last 12 months, and so there's suddenly now TA teams are being asked to do more with less. And the HR tech world has been sort of diving into, oh, you need to adopt skills-based hiring because using AI will be able to do matching and enable your teams to do less of the boring work, and more of the sort of candidate-friendly stuff, even with less resources. So this is the big promise why everybody's talking about it. And then you've got this sort of challenge that everybody's also been talking about, the sort of further added fuel to all of this reason for change, which is the AI-enabled candidate. And actually, I think, Hung, you are credited, you should be trademarked certainly as the person who came up with that term, the AI-enabled candidate. And that is threatening the viability of traditional hiring approaches. So you've got a business need, which is we're relying too much on experience. And then you've got this other burning platform, which is our traditional approach, is now being undermined because CVs and application forms can all be enhanced and manipulated through generative AI tools. And so what are we left with in order to try and find out who is going to be the most suitable person to fill the roles that we're looking for and the gaps that we have? So this is the kind of challenges that skills-based hiring has, and reason why everybody's got so excited about it. But here's the uncomfortable truth about skills-based hiring, and I think this is what we'll have some good discussion about today. First, there is no universal definition of what a skill is. Or even, a universal naming convention of, what the top skills might be. So you've got everything from is coding, which we all agree is a sort of hard skill, to things like leadership, or it could even just be about, communication skills. There's so many different ways now that people are starting to use this term that we don't really have a clear definition of it. And that, how do you then start hiring for something that you don't then have a clear definition of? Then, so then to fill the gap, you've got lots of people coming in on, well, what are the most important skills that people need to have? I've seen 4 top skills, I've seen 8 top skills, I've seen 12 top skills. Everybody seems to have, from an academic to an HR tech vendor to consultant, seems to have a position on all of this, which make it incredibly confusing. We know that hard skills are in short supply. So actually just going out and trying to recruit for hard skills when we know that there is a limited talent pool doesn't seem to be a very clever idea. And then you've got things like, Boston Consulting Group have done some research on this. 2.5 years is the average shelf life of a skill. So we're going out to hire for skills that we know have got a short shelf life, and then we're going to have to redo all our hiring, all our job descriptions, if that skill is only going to have a 2.5-year time frame on this. Very quickly, you can start seeing why everybody is kind of looking at this going, hang on, I thought this was meant to be simple and exciting, but actually it now sounds quite complex and confusing. And then you've got the whole thing about how do you decide what skills people have got. I was recently with my daughter helping her improve her LinkedIn profile, and LinkedIn asks you now to go and put in what skills have you got. And it was making some suggestions, and my daughter was going, well, it's suggesting I have project management skills, but I don't think that I do. And I was saying to her, no, you do have that skill. So put it in there. And so you've got this classic thing now of where we know in the past where women have been unlikely to apply for a role unless they think they've got 80% of the match for it. And now we're asking people to self-certify their skills. And you've got this sort of challenge again of women going, well, have I got the skill? And then, people like me who are sort of confident and happy to wing it will go, yeah, no, I've definitely got that skill. And suddenly now you've got this sort of odd divide that's coming out. And then the skills that we're going to require tomorrow are going to be different from what we've required in the past. And so how are we going to create a hiring process if it's based on the skills that we thought we had in the organization rather than looking forward to what we're going to need? And there's been some really interesting research on this from McKinsey and the World Economic forum around this, that there's a lot of the digitization is changing the skills we're going to need. It's going to be a higher demand for different types of cognitive skills. There's going to be a higher demand for what I like to call as human skills, sort of interacting with people. So actually, we need to be looking forward rather than back when we're thinking about skills-based hiring. So let's try and bring some, what Arctic Shores has been trying to do, let's try and bring some simplicity to skills-based hiring. So let's start with a definition then. So here is our attempt at clarifying what does skills-based hiring mean. Well, it's about, do you have the ability to acquire new skills and or have some of the relevant skills? And the key part to all of this is the ability to acquire new skills, because we're never going to solve the skills crisis if all we're looking for is people, the limited pool of talent that have already got the skills, rather than people who might have transferable skills, and how do we train them up to give them the skills they're going to need to help organizations succeed in the future. So it has to be that combination of, can you acquire new skills and or do you have some of the relevant skills now? And both of those things are important. And so a skills-based hiring process then has to be thinking about, how do we evaluate candidates then on their soft skills, hard skills, and therefore critically their ability to acquire new skills rather than experience. And if we understand these simple points, then actually I think skills-based hiring can make a massive difference. And the last piece around this is that when we're thinking about skills-based hiring, I think we've got an opportunity now to change the way that we understand people. And if we're going to really uncover potential, then we have to see how people do things rather than simply asking them to tell us about how they have done things. And so I think about, how do we bring out in the recruitment process ways to enable people to demonstrate that they have a capability rather than simply tick a box or tell how they might have it. So on that kind of note, we like to use an analogy in Arctic Shores, that if we're going to get skills-based hiring right, we have to think about the world really as sort of like we might do a tree. And so if you think of a tree, that your skills are the leaves that you have on a tree, and there are two things around that that are worth noting and understanding. One is that leaves are perishable, that you have them for a certain lifetime, and then you'll need to refresh them, and that is definitely going to be true of the skills as we go forward in the new future of work. But also, you'll have different types of leaves, different colors. You'll have, oak trees, ash trees, and all of these things are contextual. And I'm sure Andrea will talk about this later on. We talked about this in our podcast, that one person's communication skills in a certain context will make them successful in that particular role, but that context may be different in a different organization. And so that's quite an important part of how we need to think about and understand skills, which is why the thing that we at Arctic Shores believe passionately about is that it's the roots that enabled you to acquire the skills, and it's the roots that we should be looking to understand about people if we're going to get skills-based hiring right. And we've come up with a term which we call skill enablers. It's the roots that enable you to acquire these skills. And I'll share in a second what we think those skill enablers are. But if you understand one thing about how I think we can improve skills-based hiring, it is, how do we start recruiting for the roots rather than leaves? And so we've done a lot of research around all of this, and we've simplified both from looking at it from an academic point of view, talking to the likes of Dom and Andrea and a few others. The skill enablers really fall into three buckets. you've got how do you think, your curiosity, your problem solving, the way that you approach doing a task or a job. Then you've got how do you like to organize yourself, and there's a few examples on there, but that's your style of the way that you like to work. And then the last is how do you interact with others? And there will be different weightings and elements of these things, but these are the three fundamental skill enablers that if you understand somebody across these three areas, then you can understand how they can acquire skills, and you can train them then to adopt the skills that you need, and solve the skills crisis by upskilling people rather than running around trying to find the limited pool of people who've got the skills at the beginning, at the moment. So we don't think skills-based hiring has to be that complicated. We've produced a playbook now that goes through these steps. We'll talk a little bit more as experience from Andrew and Dom on this. But there is a way you can go through this without having to go through a taxonomy. It's doing a piloting it. It's starting to think about your job adverts and therefore your job descriptions, about bringing the skill enablers, the soft skills, transferable skills into play, which they're not at the moment, and then designing your process to then say how we're going to evaluate these things. And with the whole playbook gives you some examples and templates as to how to do this. So I won't spend a lot of time going through all these steps, because we do have a playbook that has gone through a lot of detail to do that and to help people in a practical way on that. So here is a QR code if you want to go and download or take a copy of this, and we'll be sending out in a couple of days to anybody who's interested, the playbook and how to do this. So on that note, I hope that sort of sets the scene for the discussion, and over back to you, Hung, as to opening up of what the challenges are around skills-based hiring and how we might address that.
Great, great scene setting there, Robert. I thought it was really well done, and I'm now very interested in seeing this playbook actually, because it does seem to tackle some of those initial concerns that we have. I mean, even in things like definition and whether that's relevant or whatever. So all of those things I think are super interesting. But let's get to the real experts here. We'll go straight to you. Let's go to you, Dom, firstly, because you've been quite early with the adoption of skills-based hiring, probably before a lot of this dialogue and conversation had actually gone into the mainstream. So presumably you might have had to charge forward and kind of learn through doing, rather than, having all of the backup of the theory and the templates and so forth that we hope to produce for others following on. So maybe the first question is to ask you, Dom, what did you encounter in your approach? Was there any misconceptions that you encountered in the application or implementation of skills-based hiring when you first got into it?
Definitely. I think I attended LinkedIn Talent Connect in October last year in New York, and they mentioned, look, skills-based hiring's coming. It's the next kind of big thing. So off the back of that was, how do I adapt it into the business? Where's going to be somewhere where it's going to be easily adopted and where I can measure and track the results? I think the common, misunderstandings around it is people equating skills with tasks. Some employers confuse tasks for, a certain software. It's a task, while, analytical thinking, problem solving skills, all the soft skills, it's in understanding it as well. There's often basically an over emphasis on the hard skills that I've found when talking to people. So what I did internally was basically form a skills council in the business, and we targeted retail, because those that are on this webinar that work in retail understand that you don't have candidate pools, right? You have candidate puddles because of the criteria that you set out. So our goal was to, how do you then diversify them? How do we then track them? And the goal was, we literally sat internally and said, right, as a business, when hiring these people, what are the skills that you look for? And we didn't even I guess, categorize the skills. So we didn't say, like, these are deemed as hard skills, they're soft skills. We let them go to market and basically give us feedback on what they deemed as the important skills. And quite, I guess, satisfyingly, but also sort of quite shockingly, was a lot of it was soft skills. So it just shows you there and then that I'm also about adopting a growth mindset, to your point earlier as well, Robert. It's about the skills they have now, but also growth mindset to want to then basically take the skills they've got, plus as a business, how do we then grow those skills so that they're not out of date in 2.5 years? So it was trial and error. It was a lot of, I guess, getting buy-in right. It's something very new, and people are obviously often afraid of change. It's about some of the benefits behind it, going to market and stating the added value, right? You're basically having bigger candidate pools, a more diverse hiring platform of people. It's a good news story, right? Imagine that. Doing away with the CV. We didn't care if you're a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. You come to us and we'll test you on these skills. That's the beauty of it, right? It's if you do it right, it's an easy sell and it's a good news story for employer branding.
Great stuff, Dom. A couple of things I'm picking out here. Number one, firstly, the LinkedIn is important because LinkedIn are actually a dominant player. It's a software you can't avoid if you're working in the people business. And if they start sort of rolling out more features that are focused on skills and taxonomy of skills and so forth, that'll eventually bleed into our work. There's no avoiding it. So it is an important signal if perhaps the most important vendor starts making a commitment down this direction, probably something we wouldn't be able to avoid. So there's step one worth noting. Second thing I thought was very interesting, Dom, you mentioned that you isolated a kind of a group. So it wasn't a case of just like rolling this out across the entire piece, but there was a business unit or a particular set of roles that you're looking for, and let's roll a pilot out there, which I think is smart thinking. That's sort of classic change management. Let's not sort of solve every problem in one go. And finally, the most interesting part was the iterative approach. So it wasn't a case you were designing the solution and saying get on with it, but just get them to do it first and then actually learning from them as they were kind of trying to implement it, which I think is quite brave, but also I think a really smart way of getting data you can trust, because you haven't kind of led them down a road to say, oh, you really need this skill or whatever it is. You had them feed back to you on this. So very, very interesting experiment. Folks, people who are listening in, I wonder whether that is something you've tried or adopted. Are these techniques useful? Basically, iterative approach with a small business unit and just let them get on with it and see what they come up with. And then sort of close that feedback loop and see what you can do. So let me know in the comments if this is something you've tried or whether it feels like the most doable sort of way to implement. Andrea, let's go to you. I think you had a different play, different scale of organization. I believe, it's international role you had as well. I believe like a big global team and everything. So give us a bit of context on your journey with skills-based hiring, Andrea.
Yeah, I have to say, the first thing that comes to mind is I realized it was 25 years ago that I was part of a team building a competency framework for a big pharma company. Okay. Now, I can't believe that the conversations we were having then about what was needed for the role and to make sure that we had a true understanding and a common understanding of what those different competencies were, we're still talking actually about the same thing. And we're talking about it in the same context as skills-based hiring now, as we were about competency-based hiring, I hate to say it, 25 years ago. So I think we have a lot of data and we have a lot of experience as well across so many different industries about this actual subject. And my big concern right now is that we are looking at skills taxonomy as being the first thing you've got to do. And you've got to create that skills taxonomy, and then everyone's going to agree, yeah, these are the things we need. And then we're creating a shopping list of things that people need to go and put into their organization. So at VMware, we did do things slightly differently. We did create a whole process that meant that we were hiring for potential, that we were hiring for people to come in and showcase their skills. So it's not just about a skills taxonomy. And I think that actually takes you down a rabbit hole that you cannot come out of. And it actually needs to be looking at the whole thing of what are you trying to do and how are you trying to bring in the right people, rather than just looking at, if we just create this skills taxonomy, then we're going to be able to match it much more easily. It's far more nuanced than that.
Hang on, Andrea. Like, there's a bunch of people out there might be thinking, what's wrong with a skills-based taxonomy? And I think I want one of those.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah, what's the problem with that?
Okay, so let's talk about, we talked about communication skills before, but let's talk about influencing ability, say, right, that's a really key skill that we need for salespeople. Now, the key influencing skill for a salesperson versus for a marketing person versus for a recruiter are all going to be actually quite different. We want people, we want people to be able to influence in different contexts. And the way a marketing person might influence others could possibly be quite different to the way a salesperson does. And if we break it down to just a skills taxonomy, we are not seeing it in the wider context. We're not seeing that ability to influence with different levels of stakeholders, through different medium, whether it's through email or in person or through presentations. It's becomes so different, it becomes relatively meaningless. And if you start to build out a skills taxonomy that's got the detail and the nuance in there, you're then looking at such a massive problem. That's when we get into the, it becomes so large, it's something that's not even workable. Plus, it's all going to update in 2.5 years, apparently.
All right, so creating it's basically decontextualized, right? So if I create a bunch of skills that are mapped together or whatever, that's all well and good, but it's pretty abstract. And in fact, when it comes down to how those skills are applied, it's actually very different per role, probably even per team, because you can imagine within team, the sorts of skills required, we may label them the same, but actually people will be good or bad depending on the people that are around them. So that's not to say taxonomy is bad per se, but maybe not the first thing you do, because if it is the first thing you do, you spend forever doing it, and actually the maintenance of the taxonomy is probably beyond kind of a manual effort. This is where our friend AI comes in, right? At some point, AI may help us with this, but maybe that's a perfectly suitable task for artificial intelligence to do, to maintain, update, feedback, I don't know, organizational data, performance data and so on, and they can get the machine to maintain the taxonomy. Whereas what we've got to do is think about, okay, in the local context, meaning team context, team unit of analysis, what does that skills-based hiring look like there?
So, sorry, was that aimed at me or?
No, I mean, basically, I've just stunned everyone into silence, which is probably what I didn't intend. However,
I definitely, just on that point, I think you make an interesting point about AI and all of this. At the end of the day, you've got input, then you've got what AI is going to do, and then you get output. And if we can't agree on the input to AI, so therefore what the definition of a skill is, but also we all have a different understanding, even if we could come to a common definition. So, Andrew's example is a really good one in there. So even if we understand influencing as a skill, but it's contextually different, people will understand it in a different way. So if the input is confused, then whatever the AI does is just going to give you confused output. And so I think that's one of the challenges that we've got here, is trying to translate. We do need to know, roughly in the organization what kind of skills we've got. I get that. But then trying to translate that and use it as a way to try and hire people when everybody's got a different understanding and version of that skills taxonomy, and then going out into the big broader market where you can't take your own little definition and use of a taxonomy and apply it out to the great unwashed of the whole job market, creates the challenge.
Yeah, and I think, as we talk again, let's do some future thinking here. But maybe the future looks like sort of a skills taxonomy or a skills-based hiring approach might just be more emergent from within your organization. So everyone will have its own unique kind of method or approach with skills-based hiring, rather than something that's objectively, oh, here it is, this is how it is, and then just drop it in from outside, because that taxonomy may not make sense. Depending on different types of business, the words may mean different things according to the industry sector, obviously with different countries and all the rest of it. So it may well become something that is similar to culture. You can't just decide, oh, here's culture, let's drop it into the business. It's emergent from what actually goes on in the business, and you may document that. And then once you've documented it, perhaps you can nudge it and change it in different directions, but it will all be, different culture, different skills-based sort of approach than another organization out there. I think definitionally, I think that's important though, isn't it? We talk, I mean, Dom, you mentioned this, like people will listing technologies as skills. That's very common, especially in software. What skills do you need? Oh, it's in fact, it's all a list of technical environment, really, isn't it? So how do we persuade hiring managers against this? Because that's what they are still going to look for, when it comes to candidates and so on. I can imagine a scenario where a manager says, that's all well and good, Dom, but I need a JavaScript developer. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, in hiring someone that doesn't have JavaScript all over a CV. So that's reasonable, isn't it? It's reasonable to say there's certain job knowledge is required for certain things. How do we separate out required job knowledge and the skills that are a little bit more intangible and actually would look for as at a business level?
Yeah, I think it's a great point to make, right? I think a lot of managers are under pressure to make the hire that's the right hire for now and not the right hire for the future. So they're under pressure from the businesses, management, to basically get someone in to hit the ground running, because they have time constraints, SLAs, deadlines. When it's a fair point, right? You're not going to hire someone fresh out of Morrison's fish counter to be a Java developer, right? Because they've got the right skills or the soft skills, right? But it's about then defining what good looks like. Let's do away with things like tenure. Tenure doesn't guarantee experience. We all know that, right? Because you've got 5 years in something doesn't mean you're good at it. I think a lot of it has to kind of stem as well from early careers, entry level points, because you can then really sculpt and mold your workforce, even more so into education, right? We're probably going off at a tangent here, but education needs to again prepare their students for the workforce, right? In terms of actually helping define and build a skills base, because a lot of what I'm trying to do in my company and wherever I go to next is hire on skills in certain functions that I know will then breed progression internally, right? We spoke about it before the call. You're going to see a lot more companies now, and you've seen it on LinkedIn, building talent management teams, talent management roles, because they're aware there's a skills shortage right now externally. How do we then build up our own internal employees to basically move across into those roles? So to your point, I think it's a case of, it's a very valid point, and someone put in the comments there around accountants, lawyers. Some roles, unfortunately, you're going to need a qualification, a degree, certification as a base standard, right? But it's then perhaps looking at someone who perhaps doesn't have again, this is down to managers being quite precious about the tenure. Someone's got 1 or 2 years rather than your 5 years, but they've got the right skills base there to kind of nurture and grow them. And it's about looking for the hire of tomorrow, not the hire of now. And that's when, again, it's about the cultural shift internally. People often ask what they want and are given what they want. As a recruiter, it's our job to educate them on the market verticals, what's happening out there in the current environment on LinkedIn, as a workforce, what is available out there right now, and being that business partner, that consultant, to say, well, here's what you've told me you want, here's how the market is, here's how it's grown in the next 2 to 5 years, here's what to be mindful of about a hire now, and looking at tenure as well in the workforce there, how many people stay in the business for 1, 2 years. Our goal is to have someone come in here, and again, it's the cost per hire, it's the quality of hire, all play into this. The cost to hire someone incorrectly for now sounds great, but what about the next 2, 3 years? So it's a massive, I guess, melting pot of considerations you have to make about when you're doing skills-based hiring. But I think it definitely has a place, as mentioned earlier, in a certain function in your business and what you want to do. like anything, is gain credibility, because you can't go into a C-suite and say, you know, hi there, I want to implement skills-based hiring in the business. And they go, right, well, no. Whereas you say, right, we've piloted it in retail for 12 months now, we've done the skills-based hiring. We've seen attrition's gone down by 20%. We've seen feedback ratings on people that were joined have improved. We do a 6 months manager check-in score. Would you rehire that person if you give them a chance again? That's improved. So you have to go there with, you know, passion, motivations, emotion, but also backed by skills. So I think it has to start in a certain function where you know you can impact change, then gain credibility and buy-in from your stakeholders to then basically look at where else it moves to.
Yeah, I think that made perfect sense. I do believe probably most people would adopt that approach as well now. It's turned into common sense, isn't it? Just isolate a function, a unit, business as usual everywhere else. Let's just try and tackle this function here and then see what happens. Particularly if it's a problem area, if it's a function that's had high attrition, or it's a department that's struggled to recruit. All of those things, probably you get hiring managers that are prepared to think differently if they've struggled with if they've had previous difficulties in hiring, they're much more likely to try something new, and that could be a very good initial case study for you to run to. Andrea, I'm going to switch tack a little bit, go to you on what skills we should be hiring for. Yes, we're going to say yes, it's all about context. It's everyone's different, we all know that. However, are there any particular skills that you think, you know what, universally, we're going to be looking for this, regardless of role? You know, as that type of dialogue sort of occurred within your last employer, Andrea?
I'm not sure that everyone is going to agree on the same thing there, but you know, there is elements, isn't it, that you want to see in interview settings. You want to see that growth mindset. You want to see that ability to learn. And we're all going to agree with, you know, we want those ones that are enthusiastic and determined and grit, all those standard personality traits. They're always a great thing to see, and we always love the candidates that have those. But there isn't a set skill, I don't think, that anyone can say is like, that's what you have to come into the role, because it is so nuanced. But I would say that, you know, you ask, as you were asking Dom, if you're looking to encourage hiring managers to hire someone slightly different, usually they've already got a ton of experience of one type in that team. And if you can encourage them to look for some complementary skills, or what don't you have in your team? What's missing from your team? What kind of knowledge or skills or attributes are missing? And to bring in people with that, that can be a way of them breaking out from the mold, not just hiring another clone, and also at the same time dealing with diversity issues.
That's actually a really good technique. You know, you don't. I think a lot of hiring managers have this. Or should we say, let's take ownership of it. A lot of HR recruitment people can end up coming across as if they're hectoring hiring managers to diversify pipeline, diversify team, and all the rest of it. I'm sure hiring managers sitting there just getting on with their job, and then they just want a solution, and then suddenly HR or TA comes in and start seeming to add more work and add more friction. It's like, that's not necessarily welcome. But you're framing it as a question, what is missing from your current team, I think really resets the board there, and it kind of helps me think, oh yeah, crap, we've got really functional unit here, but we could really do with this, this, and this. And then you could then put in the argument, well, that's great. You know, the reason why we've struggled potentially to not have those skills is because we've recruited in this way. Are you up for trying something a bit different? And then maybe we broaden the talent pool. That's an easy yes, I think, to get from a hiring manager. So that's a really smart technique to learn. Always ask questions rather than make them answer. We might have to go to questions, as a matter of fact, because I realized the time already, and we've only got 15 minutes left, and we've got like a massive ton of questions coming through. So I'm going to go and maybe pop in and answer some of these as we go, and then we're going to round off at the end with perhaps some like advice, 3 bits of advice we want to give to people. So all right, this is coming from LinkedIn and from within Zoom. It seems that 20 odd people watching it in Zoom and about 100 odd elsewhere on LinkedIn. So let's go with some of this. I'm going to answer the taxonomy question straight away, by the way, because that's an easy one I can deal with. It's simply a system of classification. So that's all the taxonomy is. Okay, first question to the panel. In your experience, what are common misunderstandings of skills-based hiring? We may have answered this already, but I wonder whether we could give this a quick go. Andrew, you want to just quickly answer this?
Yeah, I think it is that you need to do with the skills taxonomy first. You don't. I think that needs to go out of the ideas immediately.
Yeah, so basically it's emergent. Don't even think about designing it as of yet. We're for Daddy AI to sort it out. Okay. What about what are the main challenges that you've seen companies grapple with when transitioning to a skills-based hiring approach? So in other words, this is okay. They've made a decision, they're going to do it, but then obviously whenever there's change, there are issues falling out of this. What are we seeing there? Are we seeing slowdown in hiring? Are we seeing managers getting upset? Like, what is the thing you've observed? Dom, you want to give this a shot?
Yeah, I think more of it comes from the skills identification, right? So you need to understand what it is you're assessing on first of all. And as mentioned earlier, it's the hardest part, right? Because it has to be accurate, it has to be fair. Then it comes down to the assessment method. You know, what tools are you going to use to assess the current pool of candidates fairly in a way that's not to kind of give the advantage to certain groups of people? And that's the cultural shift, right? So you have to think about the adaptation of the skills-based hiring and how it's received internally. So you have to first of all design it. You have to then understand how you're going to test it. You also have to get buy-in from it as well. So it's all those kind of three pillars that you have to consider of what I guess the main challenges are to try and get it transited into the company.
Yeah, great answer, Dom. And in fact, let's explore this and expand a bit further, because one thing we didn't talk about is how do you actually measure skills that we've identified and we're now, testing candidates for? Is there a method beyond this? Presumably without tooling, it's a case of just interviewing and, scorecarding it, I guess. But are there other ways?
So we favor the RAG status, so red, amber, green, and then you weight the questions. So you'll basically have a skills framework as to what you assess the person on.
I think we've lost Dom a little bit there.
It's Dom, isn't it?
No worries. Okay, Dom, when you come back,
Base
we'll
questions on those skills. So it's the person they would. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. You just
clearer?
dropped out maybe 30 seconds, Dom. Are you back?
Oh, apologies. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, do you want to just give the RAG thing just a quick once
Yeah,
off?
sure. Yeah, so sorry. So red, amber, green status there. You'll assess them on the skills that you've defined. People that are green obviously offered the job. Red, obviously giving feedback as to why it's a no. The ambers, it's depending on how you want to hire them. You then hire them with the caveat that L&D picks them up and works in the areas that they perhaps were underscoring in as part of the induction process to make sure they're still given the chance to come on board and add value here, but equally want them to succeed. So whilst giving them the standardized induction, they need development in areas of negotiation, sales. So make sure as part of that onboarding piece there, we afford them the time and the training for that as well.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Okay, let's keep going with these questions. How do companies simplify skills-based hiring for the organization? Very simple. You download the Arctic Shores playbook, which is coming at you in a couple of minutes. Just read that and follow it to a T. Problem solved. Okay, where have you we've already talked about this, so let's keep going. Are there specific universal skills enablers? Robert Nuri, let's go with you on this, because we asked Andrea whether there was such a thing. I'd like to get your take on it, given your general experience as a person that's built a skills assessment or an assessment software. Are there universal enablers that you think actually, you know what, generally speaking, hiring for this type of capabilities, it makes sense?
Well, it's such an interesting one, hung on this one. And, when I started out 10 years ago, everybody was talking about you've got to measure all these different personality traits, and it was all quite sort of configured and customized for every single role. And over the last few years, as I've been sort of thinking about it on the data that we've gathered on this, the example I like to give is like Inception. And we almost need to sort of go down another level, because everybody's been trying to work out is curiosity, for example, a universal skill? And Andrew, you made a good point about that. You know, some of the things that people have thought about, problem-solving skills, for example, a universal skill. The challenge around that is that you end up with it being, you know, particular to one particular area. So knowledge-based roles versus hospitality type of roles. And what our research found was that if you take that Inception film analogy and you go down to the base level on this, it really does come down to those three things of how do you like organizing yourself? Are you somebody who's very organized? You like somebody who likes to be told how to do things? How do you like interacting with people? Are you a social person? Do you prefer working on your own? And then ultimately, you know, your thinking style. Are you somebody that picks up information quickly, or are you somebody that you know needs to be supported on that? There are all those different sort of core. Those, for me, those are the three core things, and at the base level from which you can then go and expand out. So I think that we need to just get some simplicity on this, because otherwise we end up with just multiple core skills that everybody, and I even heard, you know, skills to learn skills. You know, we're just ending up with a lot of confusion at the moment if we try and work out, you know, what are the top 8 or 12 skills, rather than actually what gives us the ability to acquire skills, rather than specifically a list of skills that apply to all roles.
Yeah, that's right. We end up just like coming up with a list of cliches, really, don't we? I mean, if we did a word cloud on everyone, you know, what's your most essential skill? Everyone's going to say teamwork, communication, self-directedness, problem solving, say the same bloody thing. And it's like, you know what, the cliches generally are not very useful in recruitment as a bit of information, you know. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what other. I remember having another conversation on this topic, and another commentator came up with the idea, look, motivation, which may not be a skill, and it may be hyper context specific, but motivation might be the overriding element, because it kind of enables someone to put more energy in skills acquisition. Because if someone's totally up for it, even if they're slow in learning the skill, they'll eventually get there because they're really, really interested in it, or they're really motivated to push through the initial friction points, which can cause people to abandon the scene. So, you know, it could well be you know, is motivation a skill? I don't know. Probably not. I wouldn't even say it's a trait. Yeah.
It's not a skill, but you raise a great point, and this is, you know, one of the questions that you were saying on this earlier was, you know, what are some of the challenges we found around skills-based hiring? Is that because a skill, by definition, is something that you learn and you can get a degree of competence in, the whole definition of skills-based hiring is, oh, that's all we've got to worry about. But what about knowledge? What about motivation? What about values? Those things are important too, and so that's what our playbook shows, how you can bring those things in and move away from this. Biggest challenge for me about skills-based hiring is everybody's narrowing the definition down to what we should be hiring for rather than expanding it.
And
yeah, go on.
Sorry.
Go on.
I really like that part in your playbook. To be honest, about the, you know, it's not just about the experience you're bringing in or the skills that you're bringing in. It's about, well, how would you demonstrate what you could do? So, because sometimes the context of where people have gained that experience could be completely different, or they might have had so many challenges and barriers within that, you can't actually see what they're capable of. And that is something that we did build into our interviews and our the assessment process at VMware, was not just see what they've done, but actually how they would cope in a particular framework. And that's the real missing piece I see from a lot of recruitment processes at the moment. So, there's so much in there, and I really like that aspect of the playbook.
Just to add to that as well, actually, I think a lot of it as well is down to self-development. There's always this kind of like reliance that a company will develop you, which a good company will develop you, right? But as a professional in your career, I think it's better to be disciplined than it is to be motivated, because if you want to progress your career, whilst I've seen it myself, certain companies won't invest in you. You're just there to hit the metrics, your number on a spreadsheet. Take control of your own destiny as well. whilst we hear about skills-based hiring, right, and the skills important, you control those skills, right, as a professional as to what you acquire and gain and what you sculpt and learn. So it's not just about, as companies, how do we then basically harness that potential? It's as a professional, how do you grow your own skills-based work as well?
Yeah, very, very good. Okay, let's we've got a couple more questions coming in actually in Zoom directly. So let's go with these real quick. We've got Alicia. Alicia's asked a really interesting one, which I want us to give an honest answer to. She said, look, the ability to learn new skills is a cognitive function that is a facet of intelligence. Does this mean we should be prioritizing cognitive intelligence with skills-based hiring? So this goes back to, you know, stuff Google used to do, which is, and maybe they still do, which is like assessing for cognitive, was it cognitive agility or something? So it's not about experience per se. It's not potentially about skills. It's about, okay, is this person smart ultimately? Now, what do we feel about this? The ability to learn new skills is a cognitive function. It's a facet of intelligence. Does that mean we do intelligence tests, IQ tests?
Yeah. Well, for some roles that's relevant, Hung, but not for all. And I think that comes back to, you know, what both Dom and Andrea were saying earlier on this. It's about really understanding with the hiring manager as to what's actually required here, because there's a massive, I think, assumption around two things. One, that every role requires some cognitive element. It doesn't necessarily. And secondly, there is this assumption that the more intelligent you are, the better you will be at doing the role, as opposed to actually you just need a cognitive threshold above which you've then got the ability to learn and do that role, and then other things start coming into play.
That's a really good thing to think about. Cognitive threshold. I think everyone gets exactly what we mean by that. And also, I think everyone also recalls colleagues that were hyper intelligent, but actually not functionally very good at the job. And it was like, you know, why was that? Maybe they were, I'm not saying you can be too smart, but there can be a situation where, you know, those skills are simply misapplied, or that is a capability that is not fit for that particular role. So I think I've got sympathy with the idea we should do cognitive testing, but I think you're right in the sense it should be about threshold rather than, you know, whoever's at the top of the tree. Good question, Alicia. Thank you very much for that. Dom, I feel you wanted to say something to that. Was that right? Or
Yeah, I think it's just more around, you have to obviously look at the IQ side of it, but also the EQ side of it, right? So the emotional intelligence too, because a lot of it is you need to have the emotional intelligence to harness and use those skills. Whilst it could be cognitive, equally you have to look at the social skills behind it, cognitive empathy, the emotional regulation as well behind all of it, right? So testing obviously on the IQ is great and all that, but what about the emotional side of it as well? Because let's face it, as a society, I think there's a distinct lack of emotional intelligence as a society right now, because we then seem to weight all of it towards more the cognitive side of it, if I'm honest.
yeah, very good point. How do we measure for EQ? EQ, is that a skill? Is that learnable? Probably you can get better at it, but there may be some innate traits or innate capabilities there also. And as technology increasingly absorbs more of the hard technical work, then perhaps the EQ side becomes ever more important. So yeah, I think what we can say about skills-based hiring is definitely an emergent space, somewhere where we feel that it probably is going to be a dominant philosophy, I think, in recruiting. Worthless recruiters obviously getting fully involved in it and fully understand it. I think it does unlock internal mobility in a way that experience-based hiring doesn't. So that in itself may be sufficient for us to move things further forward. So yeah, it's a very interesting sort of journey beyond. We've got a couple minutes left only, so let's just talk and go around Robin real quick. Someone's listening to this, they're about to press play on their implementation. What advice would you give to that person? Andrea Marston, you go first.
First of all, I'd say understand what the business goals are and then align any new approach you've got to the business goals. Because if you want to get buy-in and you want to get your pilot even to be advocating for it, it needs to be something that they can show matters to the organization, and it's not just a TA vanity project.
Yeah, you've got to get it out of TA speak, get it out of our kind of paradigm. It's really got to be in the business. What are you doing to support the business objective? And does this implementation do that? Dom?
be conscious of how you communicate it, right? What's the actual rationale behind it? Why are you doing it? Is it to diversify candidate pools? Is it to look good? Like, it's important to how you communicate it, how it's going to benefit the candidate, and in turn make you a more diverse and more considerate and more ethical employer. So think about how you communicate it, also what the impact is. So that way, then again, how it adapts and changes your current hiring process now, but also as well, like Andrew said, metrics, data, because if you want to showcase success, unfortunately, the way you can do that is with tangible results and the actual raw data that precedes it.
Yeah, fantastic. Robert, final word to you.
2 tips. One is hire for roots as much as you do leaves from our tree analogy. And secondly, read and download the playbook because it's got lots of great answers and templates for many of the questions that have been raised today.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, that's about it. We're right on time, so I think we're going to get like unceremoniously booted off here. One thing that Hung Lee does have as a skill is timekeeping, so we're finished with this conversation. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you've learned something. I certainly have today. If you've enjoyed this show, by the way, let us know in the comments if you're on LinkedIn or if you're in the Zoom call. One of the marketing team at Arctic Shores will be in touch with you shortly, and we'll send you a copy of the Arctic Shores playbook on how to implement skills-based hiring. Okay, that's about it. Thank you very much to our panel, Andrea Marston, Dominic Joyce. Thank you, Robert Newry, for being great co-host as usual. I'm your host, Hung Lee, and that's it. Have a good afternoon, everyone.